mean, preseason, regular season, playoffs, it's always good to get in the end zone.
You heard it from the man himself. It's always good to get into the end zone. Welcome into Teal The Show. I'm Jamal St. Cyr. We've got Frank Frangie here as well. Frank, the Jaguars have that first preseason game of the year underneath their belts, and Christian Kirk was the guy that got into the end zone for the first time with Trevor Lawrence tossing him the ball. I know everybody was excited and probably hoping to see a Calvin Ridley touchdown, but I think you kind of have to remind people, Christian Kirk's pretty good too.
Yeah, it's an awfully good pair, an awfully good trio if you count Zay Jones. I thought they had a good rhythm, Jamal. I thought, listen, he threw the interception to start the game. You don't want to do that. But I really thought he fell into a good rhythm. They looked on time. They weren't rushed. Guys were open. Trevor took his time. We didn't see very much. We'll see more as the preseason goes along, and then we get into the regular season. But I liked what I saw. The little bit of time the first offense was in there, I liked it a lot. I really did.
All right, you touched on it a little bit, that interception. Doug Peterson says he's not overly concerned with what he saw. Said it was just a bad throw from Trevor. Ball kind of slipped out of his hands.
I thought the way he rebounded and, threw a nice touchdown pass, obviously to Christian, and then the two-point conversion to Zay, I thought were great ways for our offense and for Trevor to finish their night.
Frank, that's not the moment that Jaguars fans were looking for. Look, we get it's a bad throw, and there were a lot of questions about what happened there, but when you say the starters are going to play and everybody's waiting to see Trevor Lawrence, it kind of hurts when you see that throw on just the second play of the game, right?
Yeah, my thought is this. Don't get too excited about any of the good in preseason because it's the preseason. You're playing one or two series. And don't get too bummed out about any of the bad in the preseason. He made a bad choice. The ball slipped out of his hand. Probably shouldn't have thrown it as well. Hey, it's one play. Well, what I look at in a preseason game is the whole thing. Did they look ready to play? Did they come out of warm-ups in good shape? Did they break the huddle in good shape? Did he pick the right guys? Did he throw accurately? Did they protect? I thought, again, it's a small sample size, Jamal. You really can't see very much. But from an offensive standpoint, offensively, I liked what I saw. I really did.
You'd rather him throw the interceptions in preseason than in the regular season, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The one thing that goes along with that interception, though, is it kind of goes against what the Jaguars have been trying to build towards, and that's getting off to fast starts to football games. Last season, we talked about all the comebacks and the late game heroics. Everyone remembers that Chargers game. Those slow starts kind of plagued the team, but they were able to finish fast. But now they're trying to be one of those teams that jumps out to those early leads. Part of that is what they're doing out on the practice field to try and build those habits.
For us, it's just a matter of just continuing to work at it. And we got to work at it in practice. How we, I sort of, relate it to how we start practice, how we attack our individual period or a team period early in practice. That's the way we have to start a football game. It's just got to be a mindset.
I know one of the keys for you guys has been fast starts. Didn't exactly get the fast start you were looking for in that game. What do you do on the practice field to I guess, be prepared so that way you can turn the talk of fast starts into a reality on the field?
Yeah, I think it's bringing energy, and it's us as leaders to be able to get everybody going. And from the first snap of practice, being able to set that tempo. Whether we're going against the defense or not, it's moving at the pace that we need to move at. To make it as game-like as possible. So when we step out there on Sunday, it's nothing new for us. So we need to be a little better at that. I think that's on us as players, and we'll get it fixed.
Clearly getting out to those fast starts is a priority for the team, but maybe it's a little bit harder to execute for them than they expected because that wasn't the fast start that they've been talking about getting out to for the entire offseason. I think that's why the way they started the game was the biggest question mark for them afterwards.
Yeah, I think so. I think more than anything else, offensively, they're going to be fine. I had a few more concerns about how they started the game defensively, Jamal. But again, offensively, it was one play. Look, if they'd have played a quarter and a half, they might have scored on their next three possessions. Then you're up 21 to whatever, and the only blemish is the interception. So fast start doesn't just mean the first two drives. Fast start means the first quarter and a half, first half. And we don't know how they'd have done. I'm telling you, offensively, I like where they are on many, many fronts. I really do.
All right, let's talk about the Jaguars defense now, Frank. Those starters did get a chance to play. We got a glimpse at Trayvon Walker in year two, got a glimpse at a Gregory Jr. who made a few plays. We'll probably talk about him a little bit later on. We talk about some of the young players that stood out. But when you look at that Jaguars defense, they played well enough, but they were going against the Cowboys' second team.
Yeah, I was a little concerned about the defense. And again, don't make too much of the good or too much of the bad. But Cooper Rush was the backup quarterback. The line didn't play. Dak didn't play, and he was still 10 out of 12. 10 out of 12 is too many when the backup quarterback and the number 2 offense is in there against your number 1 defense. The one drive, they fumbled it at the goal line, but they went right down the field on the number 1 defense. So that concerned me a little bit. Jamal, again, I don't want to make too much either way, the good or the bad. But look, we've all said it. You got to get to the passer. If there's one thing about this team that concerns you, can they get to the passer? Can they rush the passer? We've all talked about it. That remains my concern. When the backup quarterback's 10 out of 12, that's a little bit of a concern, but we'll see. That's the only thing that really bothered me about the ones when they were in there.
Well, since you brought up the pass rush, Frank, because definitely the pass rush is a concern. The Jaguars, according to reports, and Doug Peterson confirmed the reports, Jadeveon Clowney came in for a visit. Do you think Clowney would be a good fit for this Jaguars defense? When I look at it, he's definitely a player that would add some talent to the edge, but I don't know that he's a solution to the pass rush problem that we keep talking about.
30 years old. He had 9 sacks 2 years ago, but other than that, his last 3 or 4 years have been underwhelming. Look, if he's a guy, whether it's Jadeveon Clowney or whoever it is, Jamal, if you can bring in a guy and he plays 15 snaps or 18 snaps and he can give you a few pressures, that's a good thing. You can't have too many good players. I wouldn't mind it if Clowney showed up here, but know this, he got out of town without a contract too. So I get the impression that maybe both sides are just kind of testing the waters a little bit. But they've got to find a pass rush. And it might be the guys who are already on the roster. It might be a guy like Clowney. But I think they would tell you privately, if there's one thing they feel like they've got to get better at, it's rushing the passer from the outside. I think the line, by the way, the three down linemen are going to be good, and they're going to give you some interior pass rush. But you got to get that pass rush from the outside. If it wasn't a concern, they wouldn't have brought Clowney in to visit. So, yeah, I think that's the one area of concern.
My biggest question with Clowney is if he would fit into the locker room. The Jaguars have put a lot of time into building that culture. We've talked about it here on Teal The Shows before, how good the locker room is now. And Jadeveon Clowney didn't exactly leave Cleveland on the best of terms last season. So definitely something that we'll keep an eye on if Clowney does end up coming here to Jacksonville. But as Frank mentioned, he did leave town without a contract. So we'll keep an eye on that as we move forward. When Teal The Show returns, we'll talk about some of the young players that stood out in the preseason game and start to look at what's next for the Jaguars as they head to Detroit. That's coming up in Teal The Show right after this. Welcome back into Teal The Show. It is still preseason for the Jaguars. We're in the dog days of training camp at this point. Jaguars getting ready to head up to Detroit later this week for some joint practices with the Lions. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Frank, before we get to that, these preseason games are key for teams to get ready for the year, but they're extra important for all of these young players. Some of them getting their first taste of NFL action. Some of them just trying to figure out a way to make it on the roster and live out their dreams in the league. I think that's the fun part of training camp, is getting to see some of these guys go through those experiences. During that first preseason game for the Jaguars, a lot of young players started to kind of put their mark on wanting to earn a spot on this roster, which is what you want to see.
I got to tell you, for me, one of the things that really jumped off the page was the draft class. Think about this. Anton Harrison was very good. His feet were quick. He held up very well. Tank Bigsby had the 34-yard run. That was one of the big plays of the game. He's a draft pick. Brenton Strange had a big block on that play. Ventrell Miller had a sack. Abdullah had a sack. Antonio Johnson led the team in tackles with 7. Braswell had an interception. Think about that. Everybody had just ran off was a draft pick from this year's draft. This may turn out to be, I know it's only one game and you're playing against backups, but when you're talking about multiple sacks and an interception and a leading tackler and a 34-yard run, all from the same draft class, Jamal, in the same game, man, that's a good sign. I can't wait to see where this particular draft class goes. I loved what I saw from those guys the first time out.
It's surely going to be interesting. And when you have a draft class as big as the Jaguars do, you always have questions of how many of them will the Jaguars find a way to keep. And normally it's not a good sign, but these players have been catching a lot of attention through training camp for just how prepared they've been for that step, and they got the chance to show it out on the field. I think when I was looking at the Jaguars' 53-man roster projection, I think I had like 6 rookies that were almost locks and a couple others that were still pushing for roster spots. This could be a kind of youth infusion for the team, which kind of shakes things up.
Well, think about this, the rookies. You know Harrison's going to on the team. He's going to start. Strange is going to be their starting inline tight end. Bigsby's already running back number 2. Those 3 guys are on the team. Abdullah's going to give them a pass rush they don't think they've had. And look, he had a sack the other day. Ventrell Miller might be the middle linebacker of the future. That's 5 guys that are on the team. I think Parker Washington is their punt returner of the future. I think he's going to be the punt and kickoff backup to Jamal Agnew. I just ran off 6 guys. Antonio Johnson's going to be on the team. We both know that. He's a guy that already is good in special teams and maybe a year from now might be the starting safety. So that's 7 guys I just ran off that you talked about too, Jamal, from this year's draft. It's going to be a very good draft and a big part of the core future as this team moves forward.
Yeah, the Jaguars coaching staff, Doug Peterson and everyone has done a great job of building the youth, bringing in talented players, because even the second-year players are making jumps. We've talked a lot about Gregory Jr., and I know some people were probably sitting at home saying, this guy can't be that impressive. Then in the first quarter, he recovers a fumble and forces another fumble, and maybe everybody's kind of like, maybe they did see something in this Greg Jr. guy.
There's very few players on the starting 22 whose position could be in jeopardy that can get pushed. We pretty much know the starters. I do think the one thing to keep your eye on is Trey Herndon. Trey's a good player, but Trey's a guy you're going to have to play a little bit more zone with. He probably isn't quite as good a cover guy and quite as fast. So that's the one you just mentioned, Gregory Jr. pushing Trey Herndon. They're both going to play, but could Gregory Jr. beat out Herndon? I think that's the one starting spot we'll keep an eye on.
All right, next up for the Jaguars, the second week of the preseason is a date with the Detroit Lions. Before that, they have a couple of days of joint practices with them. Christian Kirk told me that it's like 2 days of games for them out there on the field. There's no scoreboard keeping score, but the competition speaks for itself.
It's just in our blood to get competitive, and guys are going to be flying around out there. Guys are going to be competing, so it'll be fun to see a different color uniform and to be able to do that for 2 days, get some good work in, and then follow it up with another preseason game, and watch how this team ends up developing, and get to see the young guys keep growing and keep making plays.
Nobody keeping score on those, but y'all are kind of keeping score in the back of your head a little bit.
100%. Obviously, us playing them last year, things didn't go the way that we liked it to. So, we'll definitely be keeping that in the back of our minds as well.
Maybe a little bit of revenge narrative there. No.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just it's extra motivation to go in and have a good week.
That is real valuable stuff. I don't think there's any question that the two teams practicing against each other, Jamal, is more important than a preseason game. Is more important than practicing against yourself. These are two really important practices. Look. Everybody's doing it now. This will be the second week in a row the Lions have done it. I think you're going to see by next year the Jags do it with 2 different teams. I think practicing against another team, hitting somebody different, seeing a different philosophy, it gets your juices flowing a little bit. It pumps some energy into you. I think that's going to be the way the league goes. I think just about everybody in the league is going to be practicing against other teams. Those are more important than the game. People don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. Way more important than the game on Saturday. They really are.
Well, it's because they can cherry pick situations, put players in positions that they need to see them in. Trent Baalke said in an interview on Sirius XM last week, just that exact fact, Frank, that he wants to have 2 joint practices next year, one on the road and one at home here in Jacksonville. So it'll definitely be something that we keep an eye on, because I know Jaguars fans would love to see a joint practice here in Jacksonville, and the Jags have a brand new facility that can definitely host one. Okay, Frank, you're going up to Detroit with the team. Before they head up there to joint practices, give me 2 players, just 2, that you really think that these practices will tell you a lot about.
Yeah, Sir Abdullah for sure. Let's start with him. I think they've got to find a way to get to the passer. So he is first and foremost for me. And then I really want to watch the young receivers. You said 2, I'm going to give you 3. Brenton Strange and Parker Washington. They're part of the future. They were drafted this year, so I guess I gave you 3 draft picks. Abdullah is one you really need to watch. Somebody's got to get to the passer from the outside. That's so important, Jamal. It really is. So keep an eye on Abdullah. And I would say Strange and Parker Washington. Parker Washington looks like a good return guy. Now, look, this team's already got a return guy. But I'll watch those 3 players really, really closely this week in Detroit.
All right, I'll let you get away with 3 this time, just this time, though. All right, one other thing for you, because we have to talk about it. I know it's going to be a talking point next week. The second a video comes out, Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker going to be on the same field for joint practices next week. I know both guys kind of want to put that conversation behind them, but it's something that's going to stick with them for their NFL careers.
No question. They're different players, Jamal. I think Aiden Hutchinson is probably going to have more sacks in his career than Trayvon Walker is. I said that when they were both drafted, but that doesn't mean he's a better player. Trayvon collapses pockets. Trayvon occupies blockers. Trayvon's very good against the run. And Trayvon in time is going to be a very good pass rusher. He's more of a Calais Campbell type player where he does a lot of things, not just sack the quarterback. Aiden Hutchinson is only, in my opinion, is only going to be judged at the end of his career on how many sacks he had. I think Trayvon will do far more things. I think they're both very good players. And you're right. They're going to be compared to each other their entire career. And Aiden Hutchinson, I think, is going to have more sacks, but I don't think he's going to necessarily be a better player. Two different guys who do different things, but you're right. Everyone's going to be talking about those two guys. The first two picks in the draft a year ago.
We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that as the Jaguars go up there for joint practices on Wednesday and Thursday of this week as they get ready for that second preseason game of the year that's set for Saturday. We'll have another Teal The Show coming your way on Friday before then. That'll do it for us tonight. Frank, thanks for being here, and thank you at home for tuning in. Good night, and go Jags.